From the crossroads of America in the Hoosier state of Indiana, this is Get In, the podcast focused on the unfolding stories and extraordinary innovations happening right now in the Heartland. I'm Matt Hunkler, CEO at PowderKeg, and I'll be one of your hosts for today's conversation. I'm joined in studio by co-hosts Christopher Toph Day, CEO at Elevate Ventures, and Nate Spangle, head of community at PowderKeg. And on the show today is David Becker, CEO and chairman of First Internet Bank. David Becker is a lifelong entrepreneur, having founded 5 companies featured on Inc.'s list of fastest growing companies. Most recently, First Internet Bank, Rick's Software, and OneBridge.
Stood up, gave a timeout sign, whistled. I said, guys, I'll solve it for you. I'm going to quit and I'll go do it myself, and hopefully you'll be customers someday.
David is also dedicated to building support structures for tech companies in Indiana, having served as chairman of both TechPoint and Central Indiana Community Foundation, as well as a board member of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. He currently serves as CEO of First Internet Bank, which he founded in 1999 and today has more than $4 billion in assets. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Looking forward to it.
It's going to be awesome. The legend.
The legend.
The man, the myth, the legend.
I said this before we turned the recording on, but if there was a Mount Rushmore of Midwest entrepreneurs, you would absolutely be on that Mount Rushmore. Yeah, we just need some mountains here. Maybe Southern Indiana hills. So
Right.
we could mow it into a lawn somewhere.
I don't know, Toph, could we get that on the side of the J-Dub for a
Absolutely.
rally?
Oh, that's a
Mount
great
Rushmore.
idea.
The biggest fat head of all time, right?
Yeah, just a big sticker. Yeah, I love that.
I love it.
David, I'd love to learn a little bit more just about your childhood, upbringing, early exposure to entrepreneurship, because I think a lot of our conversations, one, you've been like on bat phone, hey, can you tell me some feedback on my own entrepreneurial venture? So selfishly, a lot of the conversations have been around my own business. So I'd love to hear just about your early exposure to business and entrepreneurship when you were younger.
Yeah, actually, my father would tell you I've been independent since I was 8 years old. Dating myself here. Back in the day, there used to be the Indianapolis Times, an afternoon newspaper. You had the Star in the morning, Times in the afternoon. And I got a Times newspaper route. Again, dating myself, I was on a Stingray bicycle, the kind of banana seat,
Awesome.
big long
Those are the
handlebars.
bomb.
I'm getting a great mental image here.
Yeah, and I'm running around, tooling around on that, and then I realized, hey, if I had a 10-speed bicycle, I could actually drive a little faster, get a few more customers. I won national sales contests for the Times. I got to go see Washington, D.C. on a 4-day bus trip, which was interesting, with a bunch of 9, 10-year-old kids on a bus and a couple chaperones. And so that was the beginning. I learned sales marketing. I had the collection routine. If I sold it, I had to collect, and really worked out a little budget. My dad did not get me a 10-speed bicycle. He got it for me and then charged me back on a weekly basis. So I learned cash flow. I learned the whole game, and that was the beginning of the end.
At 8 years old,
At 8
that's
years old,
awesome.
yeah.
I had a paper route for 6 years growing up, but I never had to sell anything selling the Journal and Courier. They sold for me. I just had to get them there on time. How did you,
Logistics business.
yeah, I'm curious how you sold newspapers back then. How do you sell the Indianapolis Times? Was that door to door?
Yeah, literally, you go door to door, knock on them, and say, "Hey, are you interested?" And most folks would at least sign up for. They had a trial subscription or a program where you pay for 3 months, get 3 months free. So I could get about everybody to do it. Nobody wouldn't tell an 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid, "Hey, you're not going to do this," when it was like $2 or something total. But and then the key was to keep them, and that was going back to the service part, delivering on time. When it was rainy, you had them wrapped in plastic so they didn't get a soggy paper on the front. And I always took them up to the doorstep. I didn't wing them into the front yard. And, except for one house that had a very large German Shepherd. And I just, I got that close to the front door and figured that was good.
You don't want to risk it.
I would have loved to be a fly on the wall in like the Indianapolis Times, the meeting where they're like, you know what? 8-year-olds, that's who we need to sell this to. That's going to get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. So from there on, was this is it? Business is my game? Or were there other things that you were interested in exploring when you were a kid?
No, actually, that was about it, because shortly thereafter, when I was going into 7th grade, my parents moved out to the country. My dad grew up on a cattle ranch in North Dakota. My mother grew up on a tobacco farm in Kentucky, and we were living in Eagledale, just north of the Motor Speedway. And I had 60 of my closest friends within 50 feet of me, it seemed. And they both wanted to go back to the country. So we were building a house, didn't get it done. in time for us to start the school system. So we rented a house on a 100-acre farm. And there, the closest neighbor was a half a mile away, and I thought I had died. I was trying to figure out what I did to piss my parents off and why they took me to
My
live in
life is
purgatory.
ruined.
Yeah, I'm done. I'll never have friends again. And there, it was the same game. I there was Gasberg General Store, which had gas pumps out front. They sold lawnmowers, they sold saddles, they sold everything. So I kept the entrepreneurial play going, working with them, struck a deal with the owner. If he took a lawnmower in on trade and I could get it refurbished, I would get half of what it was worth when he sold it later on, and did that. Then I worked with farmers, and I would put up hay based on the number of bales, not a per hour basis, because I knew I could out hustle most of the kids,
Yes.
do the other games. So yeah, it's just been kind of ingrained all the way through.
Pun intended.
Yes.
Toph and I both have backgrounds in farming. I didn't know about the North Dakota roots. My mom grew up on a cattle farm in North Dakota, and my grandfather kind of founded that farm, I don't know, 100 plus years ago. Or my great grandfather founded that farm 100 plus years ago. Are there elements of farming that you think you learned through your family that you use today in business?
Oh, without question. The farming play, my grandfather did the same thing. They were down in the Badlands of North Dakota. Actually, they're right almost on the side of the Teddy Roosevelt National Park today. And he went out with my grandmother during the Depression in a Model T pickup truck with 2 cows in the back. And
awesome.
Ted's last roundup, and they literally would go cross country from North Dakota down to Kansas to take them to market. And Chuck Wagon and that whole routine, he had 840 cows. That's his last run to market. And then they moved back to Wisconsin outside of Sheboygan, where most of my dad's family's from. And the play there, he started raising chickens for eggs, and he wound up making his own feed and mixing the grain or whatever. And the quality of the eggs was so good that the restaurants in Chicago would send up trucks 2 times a week to pick up eggs directly from him instead of sending them into the market. So yeah, my grandfather set the stage. My dad grew up out in North Dakota. He was one of 8 children to run the farm. My mother was one of 14 children to run the tobacco farm. And the play, in fact, part of my drive and focus. I was the first one in my family on either side. And I think I counted it up one time. I've got over 100 cousins to actually make it to college. And part of that was my mom wanted to go to college. She actually graduated valedictorian of the little school she went to in Jamestown, Kentucky. But my grandfather said, no daughter of mine's going to go to college. You have children and you have a family and you take care of the house. You don't need a college education to do that. So
Different times.
yeah, totally different times. And she's the one that planted the seed in me that if you get an opportunity, you got to go to college. So, and the whole play, and I was actually telling somebody the story this morning when I was at the PAW, I had a chance to have lunch with Ross Perot, the founder of EDS.
Wow.
And I believed at the time and still believe today that your biggest success in business is the people that you're able to get to work for you. And I asked Ross, I said, what's your secret? I said, you have a phenomenal company and literally your number one asset is people. How do you get good quality people? He said, nobody's really asked me that, but I went back, had head of HR go and find out what are the characteristics in the top 10 performers we have in the company today, the up and coming ranks, what common characteristics they have. 8 out of 10 grew up on dairy farms in the Midwest. If you think about it, cows get milked twice a day, 365 days a year. If you're sick or the weather's bad, whatever it is, you just figure out how to get it done. So he actually added a line to the bottom of the application process at EDS. Said, by chance, did you grow up on a dairy farm in the Midwest? If you checked yes, you immediately went to the top of the heap. And I think that part of it, just their work ethic and the desire that you relied upon yourself to get things done. And I think that suited me well in getting the companies off the ground in the early stages.
So when you went to DePaul, how'd you pick DePaul? And when you went there, were you thinking all along that this is my go to college and I'm going to go get a job, corporate executive route? Or were you thinking I'm going to go learn, build relationships and figure out what I want to start out of school? And then what'd you do after school?
I wound up at DePaul kind of by accident. My parents didn't have the financial wherewithal to send me to college. So the only school that I could apply to that I thought of at the time that I could get in without a congressional appointment was the Coast Guard Academy. If you go to any of the other military academies, you have to have a letter from the senator or whoever in your state. Coast Guard Academy started with 10,200 applications, 10,400 applications, something like that. But they whittled it down during my senior year in school from 1 to 10,000 to they actually accepted 420.
Oh,
And I made the cut. FBI came out, interviewed my neighbors and stuff. It freaked out everybody in Monrovia, Indiana.
First time that had happened in your neighborhood.
When the feds are running around, unless you were moonshining or hustling
Right,
drugs,
right.
there's no reason for the feds to be
did they
in
have
town.
black coats and sunglasses?
Oh, black coat, sunglasses, dark cars, black
awesome.
wall tires. It was the whole game.
That's quite a scene.
So I got through that process, and I was literally supposed to go into July 4th. And one of the things that attracted me to the Coast Guard Academy, they still today have a 3-masted schooner. You go to New London, Connecticut, jump on that boat. You go south as far as they can get and come back. So you're back at Labor Day to start classes. And I thought, man, what a hell of a way to learn about sailing and the ocean and whatever. And I've always loved the ocean and water. But it was 1971 and the Vietnam War was going on. And about 6 weeks before I went to say I do, I decided I can't do this. Somebody's going to tell me to scrub a floor with a toothbrush. I'm going to tell them where to put the toothbrush. I'm going to wind up in Vietnam.
Help them get it there.
Yeah. I thought, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I went to my high school guidance counselor, and she goes, you've missed all the cutoff dates. This is like mid-May. And I said, I understand that, but I need to do something even if I have to set out a year. So she goes, my husband went to DePaul. Let's go over and talk to him. And from Monrovia, it's only about a 30-minute drive, 40-minute drive. So went in, and lo and behold, spent an afternoon with admissions, toured the campus. Next day, I got a full ride scholarship from him.
Hey, yo.
Worked out awesome and made it through the 4-year program. I went in, really honestly thought I was going to go to law school. I've had a lot of pivots in my life. Saying no to the Coast Guard Academy, which is the first time my father, and probably about the only time I ever dropped an F-bomb. My God, what the F is wrong with you? Because I don't have the money. This is a free ride. You can't do that. Then I pivoted and went to DePaul University. I was going to go to law school. About 2 weeks before I was supposed to graduate, I decided, I really don't want to do that either. So I hooked up with a headhunter in Indianapolis. Long story short, I got a job with General Electric Credit Corporation during the days of Jack Welch. I was running the show and the credit side at that point in time, and it was phenomenal. I still today say that was my working MBA.
Yep.
They spent a ton of money on education, and I was in the management trainee program. Only worked with them for about 3.5 years, but I was at a position where the average seniority was over 20 years. And I hit that corporate wall. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. And I did have the reputation. I did a couple things that blew up GE. One, I asked, in a public forum, I asked Jack Welch a question, and I survived.
What was the question?
To this day, I can't remember what it was, but he made a presentation about where the credit corporation was going. We're up in Chicago. I put my hand up in the air. My boss is trying to pull my hand down. He said, you don't ask Jack a question. It's Neutron Jack. He comes to town, the buildings stay, and the people disappear.
Yeah.
And he said, young man back there, you got a question? And I said, yes, sir, I do. And stood up, got a microphone, asked him the question. He answered it, and then there was deathly silence. Nobody else asked a question. He goes, okay, let me give you a couple closing remarks. And he finished up, and then he goes, young man in the back, would you please walk up to the stage? I'd like to talk to you for a minute. My boss says, oh, God, he's going to fire you. I'll get you back to Indianapolis. From there, you're on your own. Went up, asked the question, and introduced myself. He said, hey, I got to tell you, I've done this show in 6 different cities. You're the first person that, pardon the French, had the balls to ask me a question. And it was a damn good question. So I just want to shake hands and say thank you. I really appreciate it. And so that was the play.
That's a good lesson there.
Tremendous lesson. Yeah.
Just go for it.
Yeah, go for it. You got nothing to lose. And I was 22 years old, and if he wanted to fire me, so be it.
Yeah.
And then,
And if he did, you shouldn't be there anyway.
shouldn't be there
right?
to begin with, yeah. If over something like that.
Yeah.
If I asked a really inane or stupid question or called them an asshole or something, I guess that's reason to fire me, but I was being pretty nice. And then I tried to get another position. I wanted to do something else. And I found out after the course was over that my boss was holding me back because my numbers enabled him to get the best bonus he had ever had in his career. And he was only a couple of years away from retirement. So I learned a big corporate lesson there as well. So I got the exit interview from the HR department down in Cincinnati that covered our area. And when I got the questionnaire, it was like 4 pages. And I wrote across the front page in big letters, if I thought you really cared, I'd fill this out. And Buck Buchanan, who was the regional director for HR in Cincinnati, tracked me down. He said, Dave, I've been doing this job for 30 years, and that's the best answer I've ever seen on this form. He said, I will tell you, your file had 4 stars, which meant they thought you could go to general office. And he said, when I sent this response of yours up to general office, they want me to try and recruit you back. And they too felt it was probably the best answer they'd ever seen. I said, it's too late, my man. I've made a commitment, and I'm moving on. But
what's interesting to me when I hear about your early stories of like early career Dave Becker is you really trusted, it seems like you really trusted yourself.
Yeah.
Almost went to Vietnam last minute. No, this doesn't feel right. Let's figure out a different plan. Almost went to the Naval Academy. Oh, it doesn't quite feel right. Almost went into law school, but no, maybe not quite right. And whether or not that always happened right before the actual decision went through, at the end of the day,
I think part of it goes back to my grandfather and sitting and talking with him. I wrote business plans for years about everything from car washes to convenience stores, service stations, laundromats, you name it. I had all these crazy ideas. And when I actually came up with the idea of the RDS, or Remember Data, the first services company I built, I outlined it to my grandfather, and he said, hey, this makes a lot of sense. He said, you know the industry, you know the play, you can hire the people that can do the programming. I was a political science major. Still to this day, I'll give my kids the iPhone to fix for me when I get a new one. And I didn't have the technical chops, but I understood the industry and the play. And the piece of advice that he gave me, which has stuck with me, and technically I was doing it before he gave it to me, is no matter what happens, they can't eat you.
Yeah.
You as an individual will always survive. So have confidence in yourself. Whatever happens, you're going to make it, and you'll get over the finish line one way or another. And he said, and by the way, you're young enough, you could file bankruptcy 4 or 5 times, still survive. So go for it. And I think, it's just extreme. And my brother and sister both say, how in the hell did you get all the self-confidence? And we didn't have it. And I think part of it, I was the oldest child, so I was the one that was pushed to get out and do it. My life got blown up when I was 9, 10 years old, and I had to land on my feet and figure that out. And in a countryside where my mode of transportation was either the 2 feet or a bicycle, and there's many times I was doing stuff at school and I'd screw around and miss the bus, and I had a 3.5 mile walk home. So unless I
that's a lesson you don't forget.
Yeah.
So it seems like you had, you've had a lot of early professional career success. So what are a couple tips to that 22-year-old that's getting that working MBA? What would you say to that person?
Absorb everything that you can. Learn from everything, the mistakes you make or the things you can learn. If you're ever offered an opportunity, which GE was phenomenal at, they taught me, I took an accounting 101 class at school, and I would tell anybody still in college before you get out, take an accounting 101. You need to understand an income and expense statement. You need to understand how that relates to a balance sheet just to take care of your personal finance, let alone what you might do in the business community. But absorb absolutely everything you can. And as I tell people, and I talk to the Orr Fellows group religiously over the years, that if it's a job and you don't like what you're doing, change, because life is way too short. Even though I've been playing around for 50 years out here, you've got to enjoy what you're doing, and you'll find it. And just, again, confidence in yourself, absorb all the information you can get, and if it doesn't feel right, move on.
I love that. And on the opposite side of the coin, for, let's say, the CEO that wants to do better at attracting and retaining young talent, what would you tell them?
Give them the rope. My management mantra is, I'll give you all the rope you want. You can swing or you can hang.
Let's go.
Yeah, and particularly this generation coming out of school today, they want to do things. They want to be involved. They want to be engaged. And if you micromanage them or give them just menial tasks, they're going to get bored to tears. They're going to move on in a heartbeat. So you hired them for a reason. Let them go do it. And if they succeed, and I tell everybody in the organization, if you don't make mistakes, you're not out on the edge and doing what you should be doing. The only time you'll get fired around here for making a mistake is you keep repeating it.
That's right.
That doesn't fly. If you keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, that doesn't play. But you're here for a reason, and there are no sacred cows in any of the companies I've built over the last 40 years. Everything's up for grabs. In fact, we have a group of summer interns in a couple of weeks here. They're going to make their final presentation to the senior management team at the bank. And what they're charged with the day they come in is find something, even as an intern, find something in the organization you would change, whether it's in the area you're working in, if it's something you think that the bank should do differently. And it's phenomenal. We get anywhere from 12 to 15 interns a year, we'll come away with 6 or 7 just phenomenal ideas because they have no blinders on. It's all new experience to them. They haven't been beat up by society or the business world. So it's fresh, great ideas, and it works fabulously. I had to convince my team that this really is viable and valuable. But once we got over that hurdle, it's worked out phenomenal.
Are you ready to transform your brand with award-winning video content that captures your vision and connects with your audience? Check out Alchemy, the experts at building your brand using video. From story-driven social media snippets that leave a lasting impression to compelling full-length documentaries, they have got the expertise to take your brand to the next level. Alchemy is actually our video partner here on Get In, and they do amazing work. All of the videos across social, across YouTube, all of that is done by Alchemy, and they're an amazing partner to work with. Reach out to me, Nate, at PowderKeg, or check out alchemyfilmco.com to get connected with Alden and his team. They will take care of all of your video needs.
How did you come up with your first idea for your first tech company? Maybe not your first idea, but how did you come up with the idea for your first tech company?
I was forced into it. I was a consultant with the Indiana Credit Union League, and I had, she's long passed away, so this is okay. I did a consulting gig for the University of Notre Dame Credit Union, and Ruth Kelly was the CEO. And I said, hey guys, right now everything's running really smooth, but everything looks like we're going to go into an economic downturn. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s when rates are starting to blow up like we're doing today. And I said, you need to look at this, boom, boom. And so I drove back from South Bend, got home about 1 a.m. I had to go to Southern Indiana down in Evansville the next day. So I'm in the office at 5 a.m. And the CEO had already left a note on my desk, Dave, see me before you go to Evansville. And what I do is I walk in. He goes, I got a call from Ruth Kelly about 11 o'clock last night. You understand she's chairman of the board. And you were saying some things that weren't really great about her institution. I said, Mort, I was just forecasting what's coming. And I said, if they didn't get control of delinquency, they have customers all over the world. There's just some things fundamentally, they just trusted everybody. And I said, I live in the world of trust but verify. And there are some things she needs to do or she could have a real problem if the economy goes south. He goes, tell you what, next time before you do something like that, let me know ahead of time so I can soften it a little bit going in. And he said, a lot of what you talked about was computer services, that they were very archaic and they weren't automating things that they should be. He said, do you have an alternative? I said, no. At that point in time, it was Merchants Bank. The original Frog Bank here in Indianapolis was the primary provider in the state. And I said, their product, they're selling banking products to a group that has a lot more flexibility and power. I said, they really don't work. And he said, again, you keep saying bad things about them, but they pay part of your paycheck because through our services corp, we get, I said, the kickback. He goes, no, it's not a kickback. It's a service fee for backing up their services. So he told me, you got 6 months, either find an alternative or start saying good things. I said, okay, I'll find an alternative. So literally over the next 6 months, I continued to do the day job, but I kept searching for an alternative. Long story short, found a software product in Grand Rapids, wrote a business plan with the idea that the Services Corp would start their own data center and we'd sell product to credit unions around the state. Made a 2-hour presentation to the board of directors. They spent 45 minutes not discussing whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, what committee should do it, and is this EFT, is this Services Corp, whatever. So literally, another one of those turning points in my life, I stood up, gave a timeout sign, whistled, and said, guys, I'll solve it for you. I'm going to quit and I'll go do it myself. And hopefully you'll be customers someday. So I literally walked out of the boardroom, went and cleaned out my desk, went home, called the guy in Michigan. I said, hey, meeting didn't go quite like I thought it was going to. So instead of buying the software, what's the chance of you selling to me wholesale, let me retail? He didn't want to go outside of the state of Michigan. And he said, we can do that. And he goes, when do you want to get together? Looked at my watch and I said, I'll meet you. Gave him a restaurant in Grand Rapids. I'll meet you there for dinner at 6:30. He said, tonight? I said, yeah, tonight. So went up 6:30, did a handshake deal, literally drove back to Indianapolis and left up there about midnight. Went to my attorney's office at Keystone of the Crossing, literally got in the building, sat down in front of the door, went to sleep, passed out. So yes. They came in the morning and they go, hey, what's going on? What are you doing here in the hallway? I said, I had a long night, had to go to Grand Rapids, yada, yada. And we didn't get the thing worked out like we thought at the league, so I need to start a company today and get off the ground. That was it. That was the start of RDS on April 8th, 1981.
You really burned the ships on
Yeah.
that one.
Yes.
Totally. Actually, the head of the services corp on the way out the front door, he goes, Dave, he said, man, I don't understand what in the world you're doing. He said, you've got such a reputation, not only in Indiana, but in the Midwest. You could coast for 30 years and nobody's going to touch you. I said, no, I don't coast. That's not the life I want to lead. I said, I want to do things. He goes, when it doesn't work out, call me up. I'll get your old job back. And that was the best motivator I could have had in the world. And I said, Dan, that's not going to happen, but we'll see you someday. So,
Do you think entrepreneurs need to burn the ships in order to be successful?
I would say sometimes I'd tell people, particularly with relationships with other individuals, like with Dan, I didn't burn that relationship because invariably in life, people will recycle probably more so than the business side of it. But when you know and even with the trade association, the folks in that room that day, 20 out of 24 wound up being customers of mine through my services organization. So I made a tremendous change. I didn't blame it on them. I blamed it on me and said that, hey, you're a pretty stoic institution in a lot of respects, and you don't have the flexibility that I would as an individual to get this off the ground. So it's probably better for me to go do it. And at the end, it worked out. In fact, Mort, actually, who was the CEO of the Credit Union League at the time, became a phenomenal supporter of mine, opened a lot of doors for me, and it worked out really well. So and the first advertising piece we got put together was, on the front cover was, what if somebody who really understood credit unions started a computer company? And that was a whole play. I knew what needed to go in one side, come out the other. What went on in between, I had no idea, but I was able to hire great people that could make it dance across the table if I wanted it to.
That's a great advertisement. And I was thinking about what you were saying, and it's almost like burn the ships in your career, but don't burn the bridges to the relationships.
Yeah, it is amazing how every 5 or 10 years these relationships come full circle that you never even imagined.
Yeah, we're a great example of that. You spoke at one of our first Verge events back when it was Verge, I don't know, 13 years ago. You probably did too, Dave. I mean,
out on Kessler Boulevard, that old funky house.
That was crazy. That the Kessler Mansion with the dolphin,
the
dolphin
dolphins,
fountains.
crazy stuff out front.
We had like both mayoral candidates there.
Yeah.
That was an awesome talk. I think we have that one recorded actually. So we have to dig that one up from the archives.
What I think is interesting about these stories is, so the name of this podcast is Get In. And the whole concept is like two things. It's, number one, it's just don't be afraid to just jump in, right? Don't be afraid to ask the question in front of Jack Welch, right? Because all those folks, they're looking for the brightest minds, right? Yeah. And if those leaders aren't, then that's a place you probably don't want to be, right? If you want to enjoy creative things. We talk about gut feel, right? Yeah. Which is a really physiological thing. And we talk about pivot. I just think about all these things. I think a lot of people, maybe talk about fear. I think a lot of people, whether it relates to entrepreneurship or people in their career path, there's fear of failure. There's fear I'm going to get fired. There's fear that my peers or friends are going to think I'm crazy because I want to go take this other job or join this startup or whatever. Talk about how you think about that. How do people overcome their fear and jump in with 2 feet, full passion, whatever it might be at their journey in life?
Part of my play, obviously, the college shuffle and some of the stuff I did early on there was no point of no return. But when I started my first company, I tell most people when you want to start a company, figure it out while you're still working. Really hone in on the business plan. I talked to credit unions all over the state of Indiana. I had 28 institutions I'm going to go talk to. Within 2 years, I had 24 of those as customers once I actually started. So I built a lot of the framework. I'd work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week to get it put together. Everybody thinks an entrepreneur has to jump off a cliff to make a run. I jump off a cliff, but I have a parachute.
Yep.
And I have a backdrop. So I was pretty damn confident that I could get it done. Worst case scenario, I knew I could get my old job back if I wanted to. But more importantly, I could go to the guy in Michigan and go to work for him and cut a deal with him to either increase his business in Michigan or take the business outside of the state of Michigan for him. I had 2 or 3 escape valves. And I think most real entrepreneurs that are successful have the ability to do that. A lot of folks will, we see it, we do a lot of franchise financing at the bank nowadays. And you get a lot of people that think, oh, I can go get a Jimmy John's franchise. That's no problem whatsoever. Well, slinging and doing sandwiches all day is a pain in the ass. It's not a life that most people really want to live. It can be a very phenomenally successful and very financially rewarding franchise. But if that's what you want to do, or you have an interest in an area, I think I tell everybody, go work in that space. Quit whatever you're doing, and you want to be in a restaurant, if you want to be a manufacturer, you want to do whatever, go to work for somebody in that space. And instead of see an awful lot of people, and I know you've seen this, Toph, over the years, that have business plans that are solutions looking for a problem.
Yeah, 100%.
And until find the problem and then create the solution. And you're guaranteed every time. If you just dream up this crazy idea and you go try and find a customer or a problem to solve with it, you're not going to get anywhere. So do it from the other side. Do your research, do your homework, know what you're doing, enjoy hopefully what you're getting into, but have a safety net, some plan B in case plan A doesn't work.
So so your first business, what happened? Did you sell it? Did you merge it back with the other company? And then how did you move on to your?
No, I started RDS in 1981, sold it in 2004, spinning out of that. Again, the banker told me when I came up with the idea of Wi-Fi and doing the online integration and presenting banking services over the internet, I went to, at the time it was Indiana National Bank, and said, hey, I got this idea I'd like to do. And they said, hey, your business is running really well. We think that would be bad for you. You should not do that. So I went to another bank and borrowed the money I needed for the equipment, got it off the ground, and it went absolutely bonkers. And that was 1996, sold it in 2001, and we were $20 million in revenue, over 200 employees, and just going through the moon. Most of mine have been longer-term businesses. I owned Rick's for almost 20 years. I owned Dino for 20 years. I now had the bank. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary next February. I'm good at, I guess, multitasking. When I would, in the olden days, when I'd sell a company, I'd start 2 new ones. My wife has convinced me I'm too old for that stuff now. But I really go in with the idea that this is a long-term shot. It's not to people that go in thinking, I'm going to make $1 million and be out of this in 18 months. It burns up for a lot of reasons. You really need to have that solid foundation. Might be a lifestyle business. It could be a Wi-Fi that's a home run hit, way beyond what I thought it ever would be. When I started RDS in 81, I thought if I ever got to $1 million a year in sales, that would just be off the charts. I did that in 9 months.
Holy.
And it just went crazy from there. And when I sold RDS, it was $15 million a year in revenue. Wi-Fi was at 20, on its way to 40. OneBridge, you name it. Rick's, when we got rid of Rick's, we were doing about $9 million in sales with a $4 million bottom line.
That's amazing.
Wow. Wait, you had a bottom line at a tech company?
That's the other play. All of my software companies, actually when I launched the bank, I worked with Robbie Stevens or Robertson Stevens out of California to raise money for the bank. And he took a look at Wi-Fi and he said, my God, he said, you need to go lose money. He said, you're making money and I have to value like a traditional business. He said, if you were losing money, I could get you $100 million overnight. And I said, that's just against my game. We'll make money and we'll grow it the old-fashioned way, a little bit at a time. And thankfully I didn't, because the dot-com bubble burst in 2000 and I'd have been out to dry. It would have just imploded on me. So yeah, that's the focus, is make money and reinvest that money. In fact, the first partner I brought on, first year I was in RDS, we got to the end of the year, he said, I own 10%. I want 10% of the profits. Thankfully, I did a buy-sell agreement before we started. I said, Bill, we got to reinvest this in the company. He goes, no, I want my 10%. I said, okay, here's your 10%, and I'm going to buy you out. This isn't going to work because we need to keep the capital in the company. When I sold it 23 years later, he goes, my 10% would have been worth about $3 million. I said, yeah.
Quick break from our normal programming. I have Erica Schweier, COO from Elevate Ventures, here in the studio today. Erica, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And you're going to tell us a little bit about this Rally Innovation Conference that's coming up.
Yep, so it's the largest cross-sector innovation conference in the world. We're going to feature 6 innovation studios. So think hard tech, software, sports tech, ag and food, healthcare, and entrepreneurship is going to be our catch-all.
I love that. So tell me, who's it for?
Yeah, it's for innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, honestly, anybody probably listening to this podcast.
And it's going to be a multi-day thing that's happening in downtown Indianapolis.
Yep.
People coming in from all over the country and maybe even all over the world to be here.
That's our hope, yep. And the dates are actually August 29th through the 31st.
Perfect. And if people want to find out more information about speakers, tickets, things like that, where can they go?
Yeah, so they just go to rallyinnovation.com and sign up for communications. And they can also get their tickets.
I love it. You heard it here, rallyinnovation.com. We'll see you there.
little short-sighted, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So you talk about all these amazing successes up into the right growth, but what are some of the hardest parts of growing the business over your 50-year career, your 40 years of entrepreneurship that maybe people don't talk about when it comes to entrepreneurship?
Well, the bottom line any good entrepreneurs had failures in their life, either in products and services and businesses. Years ago, I did a bar restaurant with El Scott's over at 56 and Emerson with Danny O'Malley and Larry Wechter, two good friends here in the city. It went crazy for 6 months, hired the wrong manager, and blew up in 3 months. And everybody's got failures out there in the play. And you hit obstacles. There were times, and again, as Toph just said, we were SaaS businesses. It was all software. I had no hard assets. Bankers had no idea how the hell to finance or why would they loan me money because they have no security. If I go away, they're holding the bag. There's nothing there. Airball is the term in the banking world. There's nothing out there. And there were a lot of times we missed really good opportunities because I just had no means to pull the cash together. But rather than give up equity, because back then I saw a lot of folks in the VC world that Cricket Speakers was here in Indianapolis back when the CB craze was going nuts in the 70s, early 80s, and they went from nothing overnight to a multi-million-dollar company. Had a VC come in. The first time they missed their sales objective, they took the company away from the owner, and it was done. He was out of the business in 90 days. I had secondhand experience of watching people that took money to really grow things that the first time they didn't meet a goal or a target, they were pretty much on the street. So.
So on that, Nate, how did you overcome? So when you started First Internet Bank, you went around the same thing, right? You started talking to people, and you heard no a lot, and nobody's ever going to go online for their banking. Talk about that. How'd you overcome being told no however many times, and what was and you did your own research, right? Your own market research. Maybe talk about that experience about launching First Internet.
Yeah, the kicker in the beginning, I launched in April, and I actually converted our first customer in May. I knew Link Federal Credit Union, Bill Kirby, was a good friend of mine over on the west side of Indianapolis, and he understood what technology could do for him. He had a plant in Tennessee, he had the plant here in town, and I think there's one in North Carolina. It was really hard for him to service them remotely, and he didn't have enough size to put a branch at each of those 3 locations. So I showed him with tech how they could do it online. They could get access to some of the things and just totally convinced him that if he took a chance on me, that I'd make him a hometown hero and really get his business up to the next level. And I did it all betting on the come. I didn't charge him anything up front. I said, you run it for 90 days. If you like what it's doing, then you can pay me. And he did it and jumped in. He ultimately, when I bought my first mainframe computer that probably has less power than my iPhone for $500,000, he financed it for me. And he so much believed in the company and play. And then I leveraged him to sell one of his friends. And I went back. I'd consulted with credit unions all over the state for 2 or 3 years. So I had really good business relationships. In fact, the Solidarity Credit Union up in Kokomo, I made the presentation when it came time to discuss it. The CEO says, Dave and I are going to go out in the hallway. And the president says, what do you mean you're going to go in the hallway? He goes, I know this guy too well. More importantly, he knows more about the credit union than I do. I don't want to be a part of that conversation. He said, I need to get out of here and I'll go with him. But I would tell you, if it were my decision, I'd hire him now. And so it was, again, that groundwork that I'd laid over 2 or 3 years and the reputation I had with the folks. And like I say, they didn't know, and I didn't really know all the mechanics of the computer, but I knew the product I could get out the other side would be beneficial to them and give them the tools they really needed to grow.
Seems to me, David, starting your career on a Stingray bicycle, I know you're a motorcycle fan now. You like forward motion. Both of those vehicles, they move forward. And I'm curious, when you think about like motorcycles and think about business, are there any similarities there?
Oh, without question. One of my mantras that I tell my people all the time is the best defense is a good offense. And I'd rather grow myself out of a problem than cut myself out of a problem, without question. And it's the same thing, just the experience of the motorcycles or the bicycles and anything. I've driven convertibles for 50 years. I want the wind in my hair when I had hair. After 5 children, it's all gone today. But yeah, it's just that experience of the exhilaration. When you think about riding a motorcycle, a bicycle, or even a convertible, your senses are so much more alive and active. If you're running down a country road and you can smell the hay or you smell the barn or the cows or whatever, it changes your whole impression of what you're doing. It's not just a car ride. It's an experience. And that's how I've run my life. And I love speed. I would have given anything. I was asked by a recruiter at college, what would your dream job be? And I said I would race sports cars on the weekend, and I do photojournalism as I went site to site. And it's a combination of both the business and the competitive side, but also a little bit of the art and the picture side of things. And I still play around with cameras today. And
You would have, Dave, you would have really found your niche in the Instagram influencer economy these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the sports car racing page. I can see you right now.
Yes, still could. I'd subscribe to your TikTok channel.
Yes, I love that. Over all these successes you've had, 5 amazing companies that have grown really fast, you have chosen to headquarter all of them in Indiana. And I think that's very commendable. I love Indiana. The podcast is called Get In. But what do you think Indiana's key differentiator is for growing high-tech companies?
When I launched First Internet Bank, we actually did that in New York City in John D. Rockefeller's old offices on Wall Street. We were looking out the window at the Bull, and actually a lady from the BBC asked me, why Indiana of all places? You've got the East Coast and the West Coast. That's the tech community of the U.S. Why aren't you there? And I said, back to the play, why I stayed in Indiana, why I do it. And I said, in some respects, we're viewed as a conservative state. So to be the first online institution, that bought us some credibility that we're Midwest. We're not high flyers on the coast. We're leading edge, not bleeding edge. And I said, more importantly, my number one resource is people. And the quality of people I can get out of the Midwest. We have phenomenal universities in play. Is so much better at a much better price point than I can do on either coast. And the work ethic, quite honestly, is considerably better. I said, if we want an ocean or we want mountains, 2 hours on a plane and you got it. And I said that my number one resource in getting the company, the success of the company is people, and I have a much better pool in the Midwest than any place else.
Amen.
It's a great point. And you spoke on a panel that I was moderating a couple months ago, specifically talking about 68 Capital and some of the investments that you've made in the ecosystem. Do you mind talking a little bit about that and how you think about, now that all of your business successes built this amazing snowball, how you're thinking about continuing that legacy through how you're investing?
Yeah, like you say, Kelly Jones in 68 Capital is phenomenal. She's reaching a very untouched market that doesn't have a lot of resources. And I would argue in Indiana today versus what it was 40 years ago when I started, there are tremendous services and programs and organizations to help out. And I would also argue that there's venture capital if you have a good, solid idea. Go back to TOEF and Elevate Ventures. And there's tools here today that didn't exist. Almost every university has some kind of a fund to help folks get things off the ground. So if you got a good idea, I'm a heavy investor in all 4 of the Alos funds over the years. I've been 68 Capital. I've done probably 20 direct investments in companies around the Midwest here over the years. I'm slowing down, as I said earlier, about to be 70 years old. I'm not worried about buying green bananas, but I'm also probably have a little shorter time frame and objective than I've had in the past. But I'm still doing a lot of fun things. I'm doing some stuff in real estate. I'm in Ambrose's fund. I'm in the Nickel Plate Hotel that's going up next to the bank in Fishers. I'm a big part of that. I'm doing a lot of still innovative, creative things within the bank. I bought a small division 3.5 years ago of a bank out of Colorado that had an office in Chicago doing SBA lending. Today, we're the 10th largest SBA lender in the United States. So we went from ground zero to we'll do $300 million probably in originations this year.
I hope it's okay to mention, but you were the fastest growing NASDAQ stock for a couple, 1, 2, 3 years?
Yeah, in the early stages. And we're getting beat up a little bit right now. Again, a new venture we're in is banking as a service. And I didn't get in the first wave for a lot of reasons. And part of that was, quite honestly, my tech background. I knew there was going to be a lot of flame outs and a lot of issues. And it reminded me of in the conversation I had years and years ago with Scott Jones. It's all about eyeballs, and you got to get customers, and it's all about customers.
Oh, I remember those days.
Yeah. And so now the fintech space, it's the same thing. They've all been chasing customers, which is great, but they're all losing massive amounts of money. Now that we're in some tough economic times, everybody's saying, hey, if you need a CD round, let's show your path to profitability. Well, what's that? How are we going to get there? So we're coming in what I call FinTech 2.0. And we've got some really good companies doing really good things. We'll make a couple announcements in the next month or two. But we've been working 18 months again, calculated risk. We built out the compliance team. We got all the things we needed. A lot of my peers just jumped in assuming the fintech was going to take care of BSA and KYC and all the federal regulatory stuff. The fintechs, one, they couldn't spell it, and they had no idea what it was, and they weren't doing anything. And the regulators come in and say, oh, my God, you're doing all this business, and nobody's checking anything. So we fixed that, and we've got some really great opportunities coming up in that space. So I'm still doing innovative, creative things within without taking companies outside. And I think, again, I saw in your kind of preview questions the statement of what was my superpower in business over the years. And I think my superpower of the last 40 years has been finding phenomenal people and hiring good people. And I tell everybody, when you find a good person, even if you don't have a home, hire them. You will have a home. And when you hire because you need a person, you're going to get a warm body. You're not really going to get the fit. So get the right person at the right time. You'll find a home for them. And I think that's my success, much like we're doing at the bank today. In the SBA lending, we got out of mortgage lending. The gentleman who ran that division for me, he's now doing a small business loan product and credit card program. So we're able to take people and shift them into new ideas and new opportunities. We go in with proven management, proven service skills, and it works for everybody.
Speaking of talent, so you're going as far into I think this might be correct. You're diving into high schools. Is that right? To find interns?
Yeah.
And so instead of the old post the job opportunity and hope somebody shows up, back to finding great talent, talk about that. How are you rethinking about talent acquisition at the bank and how you find your next group of rock stars?
I tell you, that was a really hard program to convince traditional bankers that you could bring in a student for a 90-day period and actually get anything of value out of them other than let them make some copies and coffee for you. So a little tougher there than it was in the tech world, but we had such great success over the years in the tech business. We still did it today. In fact, most of the employees that worked for us at Ricks and Dino were folks that came in as interns and then ultimately took full-time positions with us. Last year, out of 14 interns, we have 7 of them working for us now, post-graduation. We get really good students and really good people that we want to hang on. We try and find something for them to do when they go back to campus. So we're always point of mind. They're getting a monthly or biweekly check from us. We keep that tie there, and they don't go talk to recruiters and other people. And as I said, the challenges we give them, we can really get a good idea who the home run hitters are, and who are just good people that are going to do a great job for us. And as a discussion I had this morning, there's no such thing as a bad internship. It's kind of like me and making the decision when it really came down to why I didn't want to do the Coast Guard. And you have the internship if you like the experience. We have 2 or 3 people every year that come in and say, this really isn't what I would like to do for a living. We've had people actually come back and say, hey, could I come back and work in HR, or could I come back and do customer service next summer and see what we can do? Learn, as I said earlier, just absorb everything you can wherever you can. But the internship program, I would tell everybody, get a program together, make your management, make sure they're doing it right, that they're not just giving the students something menial task to do. But in the 90 days, you can do an awful lot of things.
Constantly planting seed, nurturing relationships, planting seeds with businesses, nurturing those businesses. A lot of farming roots there, and lots of things we can follow up on a future episode of the podcast. Before we wrap, this is our favorite part of the show. It's the lightning round. Just two minutes long, 3 questions, no wrong answers. Are you down to do the lightning round? All right, cool.
Yes, here we go. David, outside of the amazing entrepreneurial ecosystem, what is Indiana known for?
I think students, the academics, the universities we have, we put out a tremendous product. The sad part, we export more than we retain.
That's a good answer. And I'll say go Tigers. Our intern is also from DePaul. So we got 3 DePaul guys in here.
Yeah, 3 to 2. We
You outnumber us.
Yes,
as long as there's no Wabash guys.
Oh, whoa. You can't say, that's the only word you can't say on this podcast.
We'll bleep it out.
Yeah. David, what is one hidden gem in Indiana?
I think just the overall quality of life. If you take a look at, even in central Indiana, the stuff that's around from parks to lakes to you name it. You can go 20 minutes in any direction, have a phenomenal experience with a family on a weekend. And there's parts you can't get out of. You can't go 2 miles in LA in 20 minutes. So I think it's just that quality of life and the community that's here in Indiana.
Amen. And final question of the lightning round. Who is someone that we need to keep on our radar? Someone who is doing big things.
I'd say our buddy John Wexler. Toph and I know him. That guy runs 900 miles an hour. He's got an idea every 5 minutes. His issue is he just needs to figure out what are the good ideas and which are the bad. But I would tell you in the long haul, John's just got a spirit and an energy about him that he's going to be a phenomenally successful individual.
John's a good friend of the show, and we need to get him on.
We need to get Wexler on.
This is a good push we need to get him on the show.
Absolutely.
David, thank you so much for everything that you do for Indiana, the Midwest, our country, and thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, I love it, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Amen.
Thank you.
This has been Get In, a Powder Keg production in partnership with Elevate Ventures. And we want to hear from you. If you have suggestions for a guest or a segment, reach out to Matt or Nate on LinkedIn or on email. To discover top-tier tech companies outside of Silicon Valley in hubs like Indiana, check out our newsletter at powderkeg.com/newsletter. And to apply for membership to the Powder Keg executive community, check out powderkeg.com/premium. We'll catch you next time and next week as we continue to help the world get in. Since you just listened to this podcast, you might be thinking about starting one for your company. Lucky for you, our partners over at Casted have you covered. Casted is the first and only podcast and video marketing platform made specifically for B2B brands. I love this about them. The platform makes it possible to publish, syndicate, amplify, and measure the value of your podcast and video content. In fact, we use it for our podcast here at Powder Keg. And if you're a startup, you should listen up because Casted for Startups is definitely for you. They are offering exclusive deep discounts of up to 82% off retail price for qualifying startups. Connect with Casted at casted.us/powderkeg.